it's the inequity is remarkable. I just want to put this in perspective again for our listeners. So based on that salary that you described, it was $29 million a year, correct?
For Mary Barra,
Right.
yes,
Right.
she's the CEO of
Right.
General Motors.
So folks, that actually works out to $230 a minute. A minute, right? It's 13,750 an hour. I don't know many people who make $230 an hour. Certainly $13,750 is a lot of money for most people. So the part that gets me about this is this, there's so many places to go with this. Let me go back. I want to talk first about those homeless kids, because not only is it anxiety provoking, you don't have anywhere to live, but their cortisol levels, their stress levels must be through the roof. And that alone can increase all sorts of risks for them in terms of their long-term health, their physical health, not just their mental health. Their cortisol levels are exploding, blocking dopamine, very difficult to feel any pleasure under stress, blocking oxytocin, the neurohormone of trust, very difficult to trust anyone under stress. And then we are astonished at the consequence and the outcome of so many of these kids, as if they were bad, immoral human beings. Right. And yet we have contributed to this. How much of this is based on our ancient biological brain, where we think there are limited resources, we need to grab as much as we can, we increase our value by decreasing somebody else's? Is that part of what's happening here as well?
I mean, I don't know the biology and the history of the human race well enough to answer in terms the way quite you put it. Let me, however, problematize the thought this way. Different societies throughout the history of the human race have handled that question in very different ways. It's not as though we have some line from ancient times that this is the way, more or less, people mostly did this. It's not true. It's just not true. Human beings have developed all kinds of ways not to allow this to happen. Let me give you just a couple of examples. If you get a religious education, I'll pick a Christian one. It doesn't matter. The same thing I'm about to tell you exists in other religions as well. But if you go back in the Christian religion, you will discover the concept of the Jubilee. Very important concept. If you ever went to Christian Sunday school, you may have forgotten it by now, but you might have paid attention when the teacher took you through the story of Jubilee. Here's what it roughly is. It turns out in ancient times, although times when was modern enough that Christianity was there, human beings recognized that there were many different forces that might make some people wealthy and other people the opposite, impoverished. And it wasn't deemed at all to be a personal failing. It was thought one person's piece of land is fertile because it gets more rain than the other one. And so the crops grow and so and so. Or it didn't flood or whatever. Or the family got sick and this farmer took care of his sick family rather than plowing the soil, whatever it was. And since it was nobody's fault, it's the way they reasoned. And since it was extremely socially dangerous, they said that. They said, if we have some people that are very rich and other people that are very poor, the poor are going to become envious. They're going to become bitter. They're going to become angry. And in the end, that's a little scary for the ones who have, because they're the objects of that bitterness and that anger. So in the interest of everybody, every few years, the chief of a village or the council of elders, if that's how they govern themselves, would declare the year of Jubilee. And when that happened, the land was redistributed,
Hmm.
often by lots. So you would get a different piece from the one you were stuck with. And so would the rich. And it taught everybody, be very careful how you treat the other one, because you may be in his or her shoes, she may be in yours, and not, in heaven, but in 5 years from now, when we're due for the next Jubilee. It was a way of equalizing and thereby mitigating internal disruptions that could be, and sometimes were, violent as well as socially disruptive. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
why not? By the way, I've heard, Bible thumping Christian ministers who learned their Bible correctly talk about that in the pulpit on a Sunday here in the United States, and cause quite an upset because their parishes had never heard those stories, or if they had, thought that was somehow an ancient ritual, bygone years, and the minister is saying, no, what is the lesson we can learn from what our ancestors did? And they did it for very good reasons. And then there's the reality I'll give you right now. I mean, I'm going to describe to you a country I know really well because my relatives come from there, France. Okay, France is an advanced industrial capitalist economy, like the United States in many ways. But they don't permit what we're doing here. Let me show you. France has a cradle-to-grave medical care system. If you are born in France, I'm talking about my relatives, you are covered for any illness, any injury that may happen to you in the course of your life until the day you die, and therefore don't need it anymore. You don't have to worry about expensive operations. You don't have to worry about going into debt because you can't afford an expensive operation. None of that. Let me give you a second example. When you finish high school or college in France, right now, the government, not a contract with an employer, not a personal relationship with the employer. The law says every employer must give every employee 5 weeks of paid vacation per year. Most Americans will not see that in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
In France, by the way, what I'm saying about France goes for other countries in Europe too. It's not unique to the French. In France, if you have a baby, the government provides you a social worker. You don't have to pay them a nickel, who comes in the first, I don't know how many months, I think it's 6 months or more or less, and is there to help the new parents with shopping, with how to bathe the baby, the things that young people may not know when they have a baby. That's just considered a social service that everybody has to get. Last example, I'm actually going to take from Germany. I'm a professor, so I know all about this. In Germany, if you want to go on to higher education after high school, you want to go to a college or a university, you can do that in Germany as long as you pass the exams to get in, but the tuition is zero. School fees are zero. The only thing a student has to do is pay for his or her or their room and board, or the upkeep of them as individuals, which they would have had to have done anyway. But there is no cost for education. They want higher education to be just as free as primary and secondary education are in their country and ours.
Yeah.
But they, in German, look at you with astonishment. If you do it, they would ask me, if you do it for elementary school and high school kids, what's the logic of not doing it if the young person is able, willing, and interested to get more education. It's better for your country. They know more. Will have more chance to contribute. They'll have more to contribute. By the way, in Germany, you get this, which may interest your audience, whether you're a German citizen or not. There are over 20,000 Americans in Germany now because they're going to get a BA or a master's degree, and they're not going to be in debt because they don't have to pay tuition to do it.
It's about support. It's about how we support each other, how our country supports an individual. And what I'm delighted about is how our sponsors support us. And so with that in mind, we're going to take a commercial break to hear about our supportive sponsors. We'll be right back with the Dr. Joe Show.
Welcome back to the Dr. Joe Show. Here with the one and only Professor Richard Wolff, coming to you free of charge.
Yeah, when we were off air, we were continue to talk about support. Professor, you had mentioned something. You wanted to continue that.
Yes, I thought your choice of the word support was really important, and I just want to underscore it. We use the word free if the person who is getting something is not required to hand over $5 or whatever the thing normally costs. But of course, it took human labor. It took all kinds of work to produce what is handed from one person to another. So the examples I gave from France and Germany are examples of a society which decided to support those who are poor, those who have low-income jobs, those who may have those together with large families, and so on, by supporting them, by redistributing some of the wealth the whole community produces so that the community is not undone by the inequality. Look, there's headlines. I get very angry when I see them in the newspaper. A person hits another person with a brick in the subway tunnel. And the headline reads, "Senseless crime." And I'm always upset. It's not senseless. If we go and interview that person, we'll discover the kind of childhood they had, the deprivations they went through, the personal suffering. And yeah, they took it and did something awful with it. And I don't want to shy away from that. But if we don't want the awful, we cannot pretend that the way we've organized society has got nothing to do with that. Yeah. That's just plain stupid.
I could not agree more.
It doesn't solve the problem.
I completely agree. And that's part of what the IM is saying, is that, you know, we all want the same thing. We want to feel valued by somebody else. Think about every person you've ever met. That's the common thread. But what we found is for millennia, human beings have increased their value by decreasing somebody else's. And then are astonished that that other person, that other group, that other country does the same. That's why we have the strife we have, the conflict we have. When you talked about the Jubilee, what came to my mind was, you know, about anger. Anger is an emotion designed to change things, but the first step in managing it is just to recognize it. And what are you angry about? And you said it, envy. We're angry because somebody has more than us and we want to take them down. But the person that we're going to take down, they're going to become suspicious. And that's the root of their anger. And that is part of the world that we have right now. This world in which there's so much cortisol. It's such a stress-driven world right now. But at every and any moment in time, you can remind someone of their value. And whenever you remind someone of their value, you increase your own value. I mean, why can't we have that kind of a world? Where can we build on that so that we distribute more?
I think people like us, you in your way, I'll do it in my way. We have to keep talking about this because I think in all people, there is an ambivalence, maybe is the word, or a contradiction. Partly they're defensive and they, as you put it, suspicious, yes. But another part of them knows. You know, there was a wonderful Canadian musician, Leonard Cohen. I don't know if you're familiar, but he did a song once that he performs called "Everybody Knows." If you ever have a chance, you can, easily access it on the internet. It's a beautiful piece of music, but the words and his way of, and the point was, everybody knows what you and I are discussing. They know, they do have in them the instinct, the pull to make it better. They don't know quite how to do it, and they're worried that somehow they'll be taken advantage of. I get all that, but there is enough for people like us to work with, to say, look, let's think about how we can better arrange our community life so that each of us, when we're together and when we're alone in our own lives or families, will not be either a danger or a threat or an object of envy or a bitter. Let's try to do that. My wife is a psychotherapist. Her life is dealing with people who have come to the point, some of them with terrible problems, some of them not so terrible, but they've come to a point which I've learned from her is crucial. They want it to be better, and they're prepared to struggle, even when their first instinct is to turn away or to not. They can hear that there is a potential to do better, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we could do that, and if you could be part, for yourself, for the people you love, for the people near you, but even for the larger society, if you could help contribute to that. I mean, look, I would guess that's part of the rationale why you make a program like this.
Absolutely.
And I take my hat off to you for doing it. This is crucial. And don't say to people, it's senseless that poor man beat that woman on the subway. It is awful and must be stopped. I get all that. But if you don't do the hard work of trying to figure out how this keeps happening, it will keep happening.
That's exactly it. That's what the I am is saying. But what we are saying is that this is our current maximum potential. This is the best we can do right now because we are influenced by and responding to these 4 domains. Our home domain, no one's going to argue your home has had an influence on who you are. The social domain, which is the rest of the world, that's everything other than your home. Those 2 domains are outside. Then the internal domains, the biological domain of our brain and body. Am I hungry, tired, digesting lunch, stressed out because I have no home? And then the I see domain. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? Your wife knows that every single person is interested in what other people think or feel. We call that empathy. But what we really want to know is, what are you thinking about me? Do you see me as valuable? And that story that you have about you as that little boy, your experience, don't let me put words, was that your dad recognized something, the topic, whatever it was, and then you began to feel more valuable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think he was conscious, but I think you capture. And I learned, I could see the effort in his face to explain. I'm a little kid, so he's taking this complicated story and trying to make it graspable by a little kid. And that working, that touched me very. My father cares.
Yes.
Look at him. Yes. It's so important to him. And so a little of what's important to him was me, getting me to understand it. So I think it fits perfectly in your scheme there, because I was, as I said to you, I was reacting to the fact that this man was making me feel wonderful as he told me about this social situation.
Yeah. And that feeling is this limbic response, this ancient primitive part of our brain responsible for irrational behaviors, emotions, for pleasure. And then we shift to our prefrontal cortex, the rational part of our brain. When we're able to solve problems, execute a plan, and anticipate what will happen next. And Professor Wolff, I think that is part of what you are asking us to do. Right. What will happen next if we keep doing what we're doing now with the economic model that we have? What will happen next if we keep increasing our value by decreasing somebody else's? we will destroy ourselves. Is that what we want?
I don't think we want it, but I sure do think we're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's why there's an urgency to all of this.
Stretch the canvas, rush with madness. Is it sadness or just a show that